It's archaeologist Howard Williams here with my Loki in Early Medieval Art and Archaeology Part 6. And now we're getting on to the object that's most universally recognised as representing the Norse deity Loki, the Snapton stone. This is a soapstone found on the beach on Jutland in Denmark in 1950 and represents a curly-haired face of a humanoid with a stitched up mouth. And it has been interpreted as a bellows stone or hearthstone of a blacksmith's forge with a aperture, a hole in it to allow the tuya to be inserted so that the stone protects the bellows from the heat of the fire. It's without archaeological context, but it's dated stylistically to around the year 1000, so late Viking Age. So again, in that period of transition between paganism and Christianity. Now, the representation of sewed up lips connected to Loki is an allusion to the story in Skaldskaparmal in the Prose Edda, which records this as a punishment by the dwarves on Loki for his trickery in relation to a gamble or a bet that they can't make objects better than the first three they'd made for the gods. And it's about the punishment and pain of Loki in exchange for the greatest treasures the gods receive. Now, in that regard, there is a potential argument to see this as an object that celebrates Loki, that evokes the protection of Loki, a god associated with the hearth and fire, and to evoke his skill at tricking the dwarves into providing treasures for the gods. But I think it's much more convincing to regard this as an object that evokes, is apotropaic, that evokes the protection of the smith and the unpredictable nature of the heat and intensity of fire in the production of high quality items from mischievous interventions and the chaos of our world, from wind, from rain, from temperature, from fuel, from the objects themselves, the careful balance and skill required in any kind of metalworking that could be interrupted and disrupted by forces untoward. And so I think it's much more likely this is apotropaic, representing Loki to protect the smithy and the smith and to ensure the best products are produced despite the potential disruption of other forces. So this is fighting fire with fire, representing Loki to combat the mischief and disruption of Loki. But it's open for question because representation doesn't equal veneration, but neither does representation equal apotropaism in every instance. The problem remains this is a unique object, and like any archaeological interpretations that focus on trying to interpret unique objects without parallel, without other instances, it's difficult to interpret exactly what is being represented here. Curly haired, but also with loops down the side. Is that representing his long hair, as we've discussed for the Gosforth stone and the Clinta Gotlandic picture stone? Or is this some other feature being represented on the sides of the stone? One could make an argument at a stretch, and I don't buy it. These are horns like those on the Kirkby Stephen representation of the bound devil. I don't think that's particularly convincing, but, there's ways we could play with the interpretation of why Loki is represented the way he is and on this particular stone. But without exact parallels or any parallels, we remain struggling. But at least it is a convincing representation of the god, given its link to the story in Skaldskaparmal, which I think is quite compelling. And certainly more compelling than all the other representations so far, apart from Gosforth. So with that in mind, let's move on to my part 7 and part 8, looking at the metalwork that has been purported to represent the god Loki.